Is there a sense in your choice of theme that our elected public representatives as well as public servants do not, shall we say, get it, that these are two sides of the same coin?
We would like to believe that the majority of them get it. But I must firstly say thank you for giving us this opportunity to converse with the nation through media. Most of those in government do get it, but there are those that don't get it. Unfortunately, government works as a system. When some get it wrong, it undermines the entire system. And our own experience now shows that a lot of progress could have been made to reduce poverty by 50% between the year 2000 and the year 2015. That progress was undermined by maladministration in many areas. Yes.
But one would have thought that by now we know the causes. We know the causes of that maladministration. A lot of people would argue that what is holding things back is actually the will to act on the wrongdoers. Is that a simplistic way of looking at the challenges we're facing?
I would agree with those that say we know where the fault lines are, because the Auditor General audits every year and tells us where the problems are. Primarily the issues of leadership, controls, and consequences, or what we call impunity in ombudsman circles. It is true, therefore, that we need a combination of things. On the one hand, we need the right skills for the right job. So partly the problem arises because the people who are given certain things are a little bit clueless, particularly in local government. Then there are cases where people know the truth and they know what needs to be done, particularly in the areas of HR management and procurement management, but they do the wrong thing. In that case, we need willpower to do the right thing. We also need willpower in terms of what do we do when people haven't done the right thing. Do we punish some and let some go, or do we punish everyone?
I guess the question is, we know all these things. Why are we not doing anything about the clueless people? Why is there no willpower to act where we know the wrongs and how to correct them?
In some instances, there is willpower. In some instances, there isn't. I can't speak for those that fail to act when they know what's good for them. And I'm saying what's good for them because doing the right thing is good for everyone. If, for example, you're in government and you follow the rules, you ensure you are responsive to the people, and you follow the laws that assist you to plan, execute, and ensure that people's lives are improved, that's good for you because it means you can govern in perpetuity. People will be happy with your services and you'll do well. But the few that don't do the right thing, I think, do not understand the link between what they do and the outcomes, because you can't consistently fail people and hope that they will consistently come back to you. Eventually, they'll abandon you.
But do you get a sense that, I mean, you've been crisscrossing the country over the past few months, listening to people on the ground, province by province. Have they told you things that you didn't know?
There are things that were a little bit new. For example, the issue of land management. It was something that we had dealt with over the years, but on a piecemeal basis. It was only during this poverty hearings that people came and said land is one of the factors that are contributing to poverty. Land was supposed to be given back to people so that they could till it and therefore they could earn a living on their own and cease to be a burden to the state. But some are still waiting for the land to come back since they applied in 1996. Many of those that got the land back, it is being abused by traditional authorities or the community property associations, or some people have been given mining rights in a manner that is not consistent with the law. They were basically saying the land claims process is in shambles and we need to act. And so those are things we are aware that there were problems having dealt with BAPO in other communities, but we didn't understand the extent of the problem. And when we then spoke to, for example, the Premier of Mpumalanga, he said he's aware of the problem and is going to call a summit before the end of the year. And I had a conversation with Minister Nkandla. He said he is aware there are problems. And before Judge Baum died, he also had told me, please act, there are problems of corruption and all sorts of shenanigans in land.
Clearly everyone aware of the problems, but not really having enough will to actually act on them. But apart from the land issue, around governance, which is a theme of your conference that is starting tomorrow, did South Africans tell you anything you didn't know about how they feel about governance?
In many instances, Vuyo, no, they didn't tell me something new. They told us that they were struggling with getting basic services, even though those services were planned for in the IDP, that often municipalities deviate from the IDP and prioritize things. We learned again about children that have no school days because the bridges are not there and the roads are not there. So we had been told that before. But what came a little bit new to us was, for example, that we found that this didn't seem to be clear anti-poverty strategies. There were poverty alleviation measures, but not integrated strategies to alleviate poverty. But we also didn't know about the extent of despair. When I met with one community, I remember saying to people, please don't break things, don't bend things, and don't lose hope. And the guy said, you can't lose something you don't have. That saddened me. Of course, he doesn't represent the entire South African population, but he does represent some communities that are saying they can't lose hope because they don't have it.
Madam Public Protector, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a moment.
Are you aware about your legal civil liberties and what recourse to take when these are despoiled?
Rights
and Recourse is your weekly program that explores your legal rights and what recourse is there when violated. Join me, Dumila Matez, on Rights and Recourse every Sunday afternoon from 2 to 3.
Well, if you've just joined us, we're in conversation with the Public Protector on the eve of a conference that she will be hosting over the next couple of days, talking good governance and how it links to poverty eradication. Her argument, these are two sides of the same coin. But I want us to talk about to get into some of the most recent events and utterances and get your sense of how they impact on the struggle towards good governance. The Public Service Administration Department has drafted a new bill. This new bill is going to criminalize non-disclosure and provides for dismissal or even jail sentences for public servants who do not disclose their business interest. How important do you think this is going to be in the struggle towards good governance and the eradication of such ills as corruption and maladministration?
The measure that the Minister for Public Service and Administration has taken is extremely important because part of the problem is conflict of interest. If you have a business interest, it's difficult to act in the best interest of the public. It is also difficult to be fair to other service providers, because you're looking at what's going to go into your own pocket. But also, people having a vested interest does not just undermine competition, it also undermines economic use of public resources. Because if you have an interest in that company, you're not going to be too concerned about overpricing, overbilling, and overcharging. You won't even be concerned about people billing for work not done, which is false billing. You also won't be concerned about something that we have just discovered, which is called scope creep, where a project starts with a small amount of money that was quoted. By the time it's finished, it's costing the state sometimes 100 times more than what was quoted when we started. So that's going to be important. But I'm saying it's solving half of the problem, because it's not only civil servants that are undermining this system. The interests of councillors are undermining the system. The interests of ministers may undermine the system. I'm not saying are. The interests of people like me who are not public servants may undermine the system, because we won't be covered by the bill. Chapter 9 institutions will not be covered by the bill. So I would urge government to look at everyone who works for the state, not just public servants. Also, they should put in mechanisms to track warehousing, because often people don't put their name in the CIPRO records. They do what is called warehousing, where Mvoko is warehousing shares for Madonsela. So there's no way when you go through the system you're going to find Madonsela, but you might just find that I am a majority shareholder in a company that is bidding at my own agency.
But of course, I mean, this bill is only one, is going to address only one of the problems. What for you are the most serious challenges facing this struggle towards good governance at the level of both public representatives, elected public representatives, but also public servants? Where is the most serious challenge?
I would say for me, it starts with planning. Our focus right now is on poverty and good governance. So the good part of good governance, the first part of good governance is planning. The second part is execution. If you have planned and then you link execution with planning, already that provides parameters for accountability, because everyone knows what was planned and what then needs to be delivered. When we're checking at the end of the channel, we're measuring against what was planned. And I don't think we should just only plan to satisfy the Auditor General in terms of the strategic plan.
Do you get a sense that that is what is happening? In other words, people are just ticking the boxes, so to speak, but never really do.
Exactly. That's what is called malicious compliance. You want us to plan for outcomes. For example, we said we're going to reduce poverty by 50% between the year 2000 and the year 2015. So a good plan would have included specifically measuring how much are we reducing poverty year by year. And we shouldn't be surprised when we report to the UN in 2015 that we didn't reduce poverty. For example, this year when the Minister and the Presidency informed the nation that poverty had not reduced but it had increased, that caught a lot of premiers by surprise when we gave that feedback to them as part of our stakeholder. But it shouldn't have surprised everyone, because we should have been measuring progress step by step.
Oh, an interesting concept. I find it curious how you even you've coined that phrase, malicious compliance. I mean, why would someone do that? Why would someone do that? I mean, there should be checks and balances, but also they know exactly what is expected of them as officials. It's all laid out.
I agree with you. I haven't coined the phrase. It's more coming from the finance sector, auditing sector, that they don't want people to maliciously comply. For me, the answer lies in a purposive approach to governance. In my team, we are reviewing the way we do business, and we have decided that we want to be a purpose-driven organization. Therefore, it doesn't become a ticking in the boxes. You want to know that we exist, for example, to ensure that people are treated fairly by government, and those who are wronged by government get prompt redress. So when we tick, we want to look, have we made the impact? Have we taught government to be fair in the way it deals with people? Have we taught government to have integrity in the way it deals with resources? So it becomes purposive. If you're in local government, what is the primary reason you exist? It's two reasons. It's to provide basic services and to regulate relationships between people. If we all focused on that, we wouldn't be having people who are building buildings without proper compliance. It would be known that the reason we want people, for example, to get a permission before they build is not just a tick in the box. It's because when they build wrongfully, they impact on the rights of fellow citizens. So if we understand that government stands to make sure that people don't shortchange each other and to deliver basic services, we would get it right.
Very briefly, before we take another quick commercial break, do you believe that you're being listened to?
I do believe that the majority are listening to me and to other oversight agencies. I'm stressing the other oversight agencies because it's no use listening to one voice. This whole good governance process that we started in 2010 was about identifying all role players that are there to monitor and supervise compliance with good governance and make sure there are synergies between us.
And very, very briefly, if they are listening to you, do you think there's a will to act on the sort of recommendations that you always make?
By and large, there's a will to act. I'm yet to have anyone come back to me and say, I will not act.
Let's hold it right there. We'll be back after this quick commercial break.
Good afternoon, you're watching the news at 1. In the headlines, thousands gathered to commemorate the first anniversary of the Marikana massacre.
The ANC and the National Union of Mine Workers are boycotting the anniversary. Zwelinzima Vavi was a target of this conspiracy.
There is no political conspiracy even on this matter.
That's News at 1. Weekdays at 1 p.m. on SABC News, Channel 404.
I want us to come to some of the most recent events and utterances and ask whether, in fact, they've put any pressure on your office to conduct your business differently. I'm going to start with some of the utterances that came from Parliament just this past week, where there was a lot of criticism of how that you're taking a lot more than you can chew. And you will recall previously that there were comments along the lines of walking on water and being a law unto yourself. Have those utterances and criticisms changed in any way how you've conducted yourself up until now?
They have changed how we want to be perceived, because it's one thing to do the right thing, but it's another to convince the next person you're doing the right thing. My experience in Parliament recently, even though it was from minority people in that meeting, it told me that there are people who don't understand why we do certain things. And that's great, because they may be representing certain views in society, and that's a challenge for me and my team to bring them on board. From my side, I'm 100% sure that I'm doing the right thing as I understand the right thing. Of course, my understanding could be wrong, but I didn't draft the Constitution. They did. That Constitution says I must be independent, and I must, the decisions that I make are subject only to the law and the Constitution. And that Constitution says in Section 182(5) 182.4, the public protector must be accessible to all persons and communities.
Where do you think lies the misunderstanding?
I don't know. Every year the misunderstanding changes. When we started on the same footing. Parliament wanted me to make sure that this office is accessible to all persons and communities, particularly to the ordinary person. We named then the proverbial ordinary person, Gogo Dlamini. So our test of accessibility was that Gogo Dlamini should know who we are, should know what we can do to help her, and should come to us as early as possible before things are entirely chaotic.
Do you think that some MPs sort of deliberately misunderstand you, or do you think it's a genuine misunderstanding?
I would like to believe it's the latter. At first, the misunderstanding was, can she take appropriate remedial action? And we had a conversation, we placed it in the Good Governance Conference of 2011 and said, can she take appropriate remedial action? They came, the politicians, and they acknowledged that I can take appropriate remedial action. Then we had another conference that was looking at accountability. What is accountability? We said it went beyond explaining yourself. It also includes remedying the situation. It's not enough to say to Gogo Dlamini, sorry, I gave your RDP house to someone else, and because there was corruption in my system. Part of the remedy is give Gogo Dlamini therefore the house that she should have gotten. And then this year, since early this year or towards the end of last year, the misunderstanding was around how far do my powers extend? So it was the first time this year I was told that there are some institutions that are excluded, such as Parliament and fellow Chapter 9 institutions. That was strange for me because Selby Bakra has investigated those institutions 18
and no
years
one found
ago.
anything wrong with
and
what they
Advocate Mshwana did the same thing. Nobody found any wrongdoing in that case. I investigated the CGE at the request of Parliament. Nobody thought it was wrong, and then suddenly last week it becomes an issue. So I don't know where the problems lie, but I just want to believe people are genuine. We're moving into 20 years of democracy. We're trying to understand our constitution fully.
What would you say have been the most testing cases that you've had to tackle?
Well, some of the most testing cases are testing because of the legal issues involved, and then some are because of the politics involved. I would say the ones that have raised legal questions for me, difficult legal questions, a lot of, I think the two cases I've had to handle involving the CCMA did deal with difficult legal questions. And then on the question of the ones that have been taxing because of the politics involved, I would say it would be probably the Begicele case, the Malema investigation, and now...
Would the Nkandla report count among those?
The Nkandla report, okay, yes. I don't want to talk about some of the journey challenges that we faced with that one. I think people will see in the report what are some of the issues that arose as we went through it. But yes, it has had unusual challenges as well. Not necessarily political in nature, but administrative in nature.
But what sort of institutional challenges has it posed for your office?
Well, the one big challenge is the challenge that I can't talk about right now, unfortunately, because I would be disclosing some of the issues that we've had to deal with going through the process. But I would say the one issue, though, that will arise, which we have raised with the presidency, and I think it's something I can openly talk about, is who do we give the report to? You will recall that one of the investigations I did in my early phase as a public protector was about the conduct of the president. We didn't know then who to give the report to because in terms of the Executive Members Ethics Act, we were supposed to give it to him. And then we then gave it to the Speaker and him as a split. Now, with the new one, we had hoped that by that time they would have implemented the undertaking to amend the Act so that there's a different place to send the report. That amendment has not been done. So as I have now virtually finalized the provisional report. We have now asked government to indicate how far are they with deciding where the report these kinds of reports should go to. So we haven't had an answer yet.
I'm going to ask you two quick questions because we've run out of time. One is, has there ever been a time in this office where you felt, I'm done with this, I can't take any more?
Never.
Not once?
Not once. I think the privilege I genuinely feel of being able to help people like Gogo Dlamini, people who are genuinely devastated by hitting a brick wall, where the state has no ears and no eyes. Those people make me feel it's a job worth doing, and I couldn't have prayed for anything better.
Your term is not renewable. What happens when you leave office? Will you consider, for example, politics as a career?
Never. Politics is definitely out, but I will continue to be involved in constitutional interpretation and implementation. I see myself going back into teaching and hopefully also going to the bar.
Thank you very much for talking to us, and all the best with the conference tomorrow.
Well, that's where we